I'm here with my friend Neil, who I haven't spoken to in quite a while, and it sounds like a lot has changed since we last spoke. Where are you at with love at this point?
I'm exactly where I always hoped I would be. In love, married, family, all the things you want, really. Um, so I have found what I was looking for.
So how long were you looking for it? When did you get married?
October of 21. So I was 50. And we met a year and a half before that. I was 49. So
Hmm.
I was in the wilderness for a very long time before I found the right person. So when you said, love and talking about love after 40, I felt like I was the perfect guinea pig for you.
So you said wilderness. Like, describe the wilderness.
The dating wilderness, just kind of being out there and trying to find somebody. There are stretches of time, I think, for some of us, there are stretches of time where we're just trying to hook up with people. There are other times when we're actively dating, looking for a partner. And I think for anyone who spends a lot of time single, it feels like you're in the wilderness, that you are uh, just trying to find your way and oftentimes getting lost along the way.
So it sounds like this wasn't kind of by choice, right? So there would be people who have chosen to remain single, but it sounds like you were actively looking for a partner. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. I enjoyed being single to a point, but I was not a confirmed bachelor. I was not somebody who was never planning to get married.
Okay. So it sounds like you got married. You found someone in your late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, we were 49 when we met, and was on the dating apps and had started to fret a little because I was fairly certain that when I turned 50, a certain amount of women would no longer be available to me. That just with the age, well, with the age parameters that you set on your dating app, a lot of women would stop at, like, say 31 to 49. And once I
Okay.
turned 50, I knew that would drop me off a lot of women's possibilities. And I also felt like I was not meeting enough of the right people, enough of the right women. So I was there weren't as many options as I would have liked, and I had to start rethinking how I put myself out there. And that was a process that I continued to reconfigure throughout the next several years until Jessica and I met. At the back of my mind, there was the insecurity of what if nobody actually picks me? And a female friend of mine, when I mentioned that at a party, she said, "Well, that's just fucking ridiculous." And that's when it occurred to me that what I viewed as organic was no longer what the real organic was. There was, we lived in a digital world, and the options had changed on me, and I needed to embrace it. And once I did that, I mean, I always still kind of hated and resented it a little bit, but it didn't mean that I wasn't putting as much as I could into it. Like, there was a scientific aspect to it, and my profile changed accordingly. There were times when I was doing this or that or the other thing, and I would get
What did you do?
feedback from female friends about what pictures I should use, and, oh, don't say that because it makes you sound angry or bitter, or say this instead, that kind of thing.
Right. Why didn't you get married when you were 25, 28, 30, 32?
I never met the right person. I mean, I was in love 3 times before I met my wife. And each of those 3 times ended badly. And, well, I mean, ultimately they weren't in love with me. The woman who actually ultimately uh, ended up hooking me up with my therapist, in the fall of 2015, we were having a drink, and I made some sarcastic comment about men and women. And she said, "I know you think you're kidding, but there's a real edge to what you're saying, and I think you might have some anger issues, and you may need to talk to somebody." And I said, "Well, of course I have anger issues. I have my default emotion is anger. But I think that I'm fine otherwise, and I'm a writer, so I get to work a lot of it out." So a few months later, when I was dating the single mom, the anger thing came up again, and she said, "Look, I never took it out on her, but she saw me getting angry in public, and she said, 'Look, I'm not going to give you an ultimatum, but I think you need to talk to somebody.'"
So it sounds like staying connected with these people that you met and were dating actually improved your life.
100%.
Like they had some insight
Absolutely.
as friends. So you mentioned, being Jewish is obviously an issue, and wanting to have children. Were there other criteria that you were really like steadfastly committed to?
The two most important things to me were intelligence and sense of humor. And I went out with women who just were not engaging enough. And I've gone out with plenty of, but back in the day, look, again, I'm a writer. So I dated actresses, I've dated models and dancers. And at some point you realize I don't want to do this anymore, because while there are exceptions to the rule, generally speaking, they tend to be pretty self-involved and narcissistic. And I found that I needed somebody who was actually somebody who was comfortable in their own skin in a way that a lot of performers are not. And look, to be fair, I wasn't either until I started therapy. I thought I was, but I wasn't. And the fact that I wasn't aware of that probably contributed to my continuing to be single for as long as I was. There was a woman I dated when I was in my 20s, and she was perfectly lovely. And about the second date, I noticed that she had a nervous giggle. And that drove me crazy. And it lasted a couple of weeks until I couldn't deal with it anymore, and I finally broke up with it. But like, the nervous giggle, I think, probably could have been manageable for a more mature individual. And I just couldn't deal with it even remotely.
Wait a second. Let me just repeat that. You broke up with a woman because she giggled nervously.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That's another fascinating thing, like the kinds of things that will just turn you off to another person. And look, I don't think this is a gender thing. I think it's a everybody thing. It could be a gesture or a nervous laugh or the way someone walks. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. It could be any number of things. And there have been things over the years where I have said, yeah, I just can't deal with that at all.
So you said you had anger issues, and they weren't directed towards your partner, but you would exhibit it, which I think a lot of men have, obviously. Like, that's a thing. But then you had multiple people sort of tell you, people that you were involved with, saying, hey, you need to deal with this. And you were in a relationship, you said, with someone who said, I need you to deal with this. And then you dealt with it, and then you took it on, and then it worked out for you. So do you feel like you were undateable before that? Do you think that this anger issue that you had was sort of self-destruct the relationship, or was it just an annoyance?
I think that there were stretches of my life where I was single for a long time, and I think that had as much to do with where I was in my life as it had to do with the women I was or wasn't meeting. I think that I went through some bad patches where I was not happy with myself, I was not happy with my career, and I think that was coming across. And one woman I dated, with whom I later became friendly, because we both agreed, look, you're great, but this just isn't a thing. Sometime later, I said, I feel like I owe an apology. And she said, why? And I said, well, I feel like I wasn't very good to you. And she said, no, you were great. If you said you were going to call, you were. We always had fun together. You were a gentleman. It was great. She said, the problem is you were in a terrible, terrible place. You were in a really dark place. And it was clear that you had some stuff you had to work out. And I think that had much more to do with my remaining single than anything else. I think that I didn't put myself out there for long stretches because of that.
So those things all had to align for you to be able to fall in love.
Right. Things started to turn for me career-wise in 2013. So it's been a little over 10 years when things started to turn around. My journalism career picked back up, and that really helped me recharge my screenwriting career. And that allowed me to start seeing women in a way that I felt good enough about myself that I could put myself out there. I have said on more than one occasion that Jessica and I would not be together if not for therapy, if not for my having been in therapy. There's no way we would have. And look, it's all about timing. We met at the right time. We met at exactly the right time. I think that if we'd met a couple years before, she even said, I think a couple years before you wouldn't have been interested in me either. If Jessica and I have a disagreement, the old me would have erupted, whereas now I'm able to stop and say, okay, well, how do we communicate about this? how do we work through the issue that we're having, which I have found is a cornerstone to a successful marriage, is being able to communicate. And we communicate exceptionally well. And that is, I mean, I've always been a good talker and I thought I was a good listener. I'm better now.
So how did you know that Jessica was the one?
We spent time together. We met a month into the pandemic, 6 weeks into the pandemic. So we had a lot of video dates and got to know each other that way. And then we met in person. We did about 3 weeks of video dates and then we met in person. And then we got together about once a week for about 6 or 8 weeks. And the first time we got together, it was clear there was physical chemistry as well. Like we reacted to each other. And then we just kind of got to know each other. And the more time we spent together, the more it became clear that we just had a thing. We just had this connection. Mm-hmm. And she loves to hike, and I loathe hiking, but I went on a lot of hikes with her because, you're dating and you want to get laid, so you might as well. And we were on another hike, and I was walking behind her, and I said, Jesus Christ, I'm on another fucking hike. I must really be in love with this girl. And then I said, oh my God, I think I'm in love with her. So I think it's, how do you define it? How does it, that was the moment I knew, but I don't know how to answer the question of what was it about her. I think it's just, what is it about her on a daily basis when I wake up next to her and look at her and say, I'm really glad I'm waking up next to this person.
Had you had this feeling with other people? Is this like a milestone for you to have this feeling?
Well, as I said, I've been in love before for sure, mm-hmm. But it was different. It was always different. This was the first time where we both felt the same way about each other, where it was a match, where it wasn't one of us was more into the other one than the other. Like, aside from the fact that our chemistry with each other is very strong and intense, it's just there's a different quality to it. There's I don't want to say a lack of urgency because that belittles it, but there's no.
I know what you're talking. It's a lack of effort, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a great amount of effort in making sure a relationship works. Excuse me, in making a relationship work, but there's no. I think when you're with somebody and you're afraid, either you like them more than they like you, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I've been in both. Mm-hmm. There is a pressure and a stress on the relationship because there is that inequality. And sometimes that translates to a weird chemistry where there's very high energy, but there's also a lot of conflict. And that certainly was the case in the relationships I've had where that chemistry was an intense thing. Whereas when there's an equality, the chemistry is by definition different because that stress of feeling like one person is more or less into it than the other isn't there.
Understood.
So,
well,
so there's an ease, that comes with that.
Well, the fear that I have, and you mentioned this at the very beginning of our conversation, is that as we get older, that ability to have that ease might diminish, right? That we might get kind of set in our ways or just be more unyielding about things.
Totally true.
But that wasn't the case.
I mean, that's totally the case with me. There are times when Jess will point out, you're still saying I. We've been together for 3.5 years and you're still saying I instead of we about certain things. It's less and less, but occasionally the default of I rather than we does show up. But it took a long time. It took a very long time for me to get there.
And you also have this other, I'm going to call it an issue, but this, what's the word? Need, which is to have children and to be older. So like, when I'm dating, most people I'm meeting have already had kids, or they've decided not to, right? And then to meet someone who wants to have children, you're usually going to have to date someone who's younger, right? And as you get older, that sample group is going to diminish, right? Of younger women who are going to date an older man and have a child with him. Right. So were you concerned about that as you were getting older, you wanted to have a family, but you were kind of aging out?
I was on the verge of getting concerned. Yeah. I actually didn't completely deactivate my dating apps until I turned 50. And it wasn't because I wasn't sure about Jessica. It was because I was curious about how many women would disappear from my feed once I went from 49 to 50. So when I turned 50, a day or two later, I looked, and sure enough, the numbers just shrank. Like it was a huge change. And I said, okay, just, confirm my hypothesis. And I just deleted all the apps, and that was the end of it. And I didn't even go back I wasn't looking around. I didn't care. We were together at that point.
Did you put in your profile that you wanted to have children?
Yeah. Hinge actually said there was a box to check if you had kids and if you wanted them.
And you were willing, what I'm hearing you say is you were willing to be alone. At one point, if those boxes weren't checked, you weren't going to be with someone who checked 4 of the boxes, but the 5th or the 6th one didn't get checked, and you weren't going to just say, okay, that's good enough. You needed them all to be checked.
Right. Yeah. I think part of that has to do with a romantic sense of who, the sense of romance. This idea that there's somebody out there for everybody that's going to make you happy. But it was not without an enormous amount of looking.
It sounds like you always had the belief there's somebody for everybody, so that person, you're going to find that person. You might find that person at 70.
Yeah, there was the hope that I would find the person before 70. And I don't think that I ever put thought into the idea of, if I get to be 55, I'll just find somebody to hang out with. I don't think I ever took it that far. It was much more of I'm going to look and keep looking until I find the right person. And if that person doesn't come along, then I'm going to keep looking because she's out there somewhere. I also I don't subscribe to the soulmate theory where there's one person for everybody. I think that's horseshit. I think that there are a lot of people for you. It's a matter of when you meet them and where you meet them. For me, it was always about this notion of, I don't want to go through life completely by myself. I went through life by myself most of the first 50 years of my life. And I found that being with somebody, there were a few times that I was with somebody and not just going out on a few dates, but actually in a relationship. I found that there was something to that I really liked. Even if it was not always a happy relationship, I liked being able to count on someone, that there was somebody who was with me. And I enjoyed that.
What about the other side of that? Like, so, it sounds like you've been in how long you been with Jessica?
3.5 years now.
3.5 years.
A little bit more than that.
Now you have a kid together, so there's a lot of commitment. You're living together. You're married.
And married.
Yeah. Does love feel different on the other side of that? Because it's now you're in unknown territory, right? You haven't been here before. You haven't had a kid before. You haven't been married before.
Yes and no. Yes, because there's a new dynamic to our relationship. Riley's birth showed me a different kind of love that I just hadn't understood before. And you know this because you're a father. Like there's something that you had no idea was inside of you until this child arrives. And that's something that I love deeply, and I value every single day that I'm lucky enough to have this, feel this, and have this little tiny being in my life. And so it has affected. It certainly it affects the way we are with each other and with him. And so our relationship has changed. Has love changed? I don't think that it has. I think that there came a point where it became clear to both of us, and it was clear to me before it was to her, but I also knew that she was going to come around. Like there's that time in a relationship where you're not sure, is this going to work? I don't know. I hope she likes me as much as I like her. I knew even before she did that we were going to end up together and we were going to be fine. So when I said, I love you, and she didn't say it back, I did not freak out because I said, you love me, you just don't know it yet. Or you're not willing to admit it yet. And it took her a little while, and then she did. And she said, I think that ultimately you're right. I was not ready to admit yet that I was in love with you.
That's a very bold statement, Neil.
It was. And I can't say that I never said it before, but this is the first time when I knew I was right. I knew that what we had was special. I knew that there was a comfort there that I had never experienced before. And that hasn't changed. I think that, you know, the day we got married, I said to the guy doing the video, I said, people keep telling me that it was going to be a very hectic day and I was going to be nervous and on and on. And I've talked to other people who got married who were super nervous the day they got married. I said, I've never been more calm in my entire life. This is exactly where I should be. And our wedding day was great. I didn't have a moment of nerves. I didn't have a moment of anything. It was like, this is where we should be. I mean, and any of that stuff had been long resolved. And I think that you settle into anytime you're in a long-term relationship, you settle into ideally a level of comfort. And sometimes that means you don't have sex for a little while, or sometimes it means that the fire is not what it was. And that's fine because it's just the way it is in any relationship. There's always going to be something that's going to be much more heated at the beginning and passionate. And that kind of settles into something that's very comfortable. We both are very passionate about each other still, but it's just different. And I think that our love for each other is, and certainly my love for her, I don't know that it's any different other than it sort of deepens the more we are together, because there's not this fear of that I think a lot of us have earlier on, and sometimes with the wrong relationship of, you see just nothing but years stretching out ahead of you, and you start to wonder, geez, is this where I want to be X number of years from now? And that's not something that's here at all. It's the opposite. This is exactly where I want to be forever. And to have that is enormously comfortable and comforting.
I think that's the irony and the reality of being older. And, because when you marry someone at 21, it's like, wow, that's a long haul down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone at 50 or, with 60, it's, well, we got 20, I'm not to be negative.
Yeah. But yeah. Well, the rest of the road is 30, 40 years. It's not so bad.
Yeah, not so bad. I could do that. But it's also, and I agree with you, it's that, once you have a life experience, so it cuts both ways. So when I find that when you get in a relationship with someone later in life, you're often dealing with whatever trauma they've gone through. So, if they were cheated on, they're going to worry that you're going to cheat on them. If they were with an alcoholic, they're going to worry that you're going to drink too much. And you're probably doing the same thing to them, right? That's been my experience. And so my point being that when you find someone, I think that when you see that, oh, we click in all these different ways, they're kind of vetted. Like, to your point about the wedding, you weren't wondering, well, what's, like, you've dated enough, you've been in enough situations, romantic situations and relationships to know the worth of Jessica to you, right?
Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Yeah. And I think that, look, and it's also, there's that aspect of becoming a father older too. One of my best friends is a couple years older than I am, and his younger child is going to be 7. So he was in his late 40s when she came around, and he said there's something to being an older father. There's a laid back quality to the way I parent and the way I view it that I think would not have been there even 15, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. To me, safety was always a big thing. Safety in a relationship was a big thing that I didn't pick up on until later, until I started therapy, and I realized that was part of an issue. Was part of an issue I had.
What do you mean?
And
what do you mean by?
Well, I think that feeling safe in a relationship, being able to trust somebody, and that was something that I had issues with for a long time because, we carry a lot of baggage from when we're younger. And there was a stretch of time in college, high school, college, into my 20s where I was in the Groucho Marx school. I would never belong to a club that would have me as a member. And, there were a couple of of potential great relationships that I walked away from because I was an idiot and I was scared. And I think that with age, ideally comes wisdom and experience. And as you say, I knew what I didn't want. I knew what wasn't going to work for me. I'd been through it enough that I had vetted I'd worked the checklist, so to speak, to use your words, so that by the time the right person came along, it was clear to me pretty quickly that in the grand scheme of things, it was clear to me pretty quickly that, wow, okay, this feels like a match to me. And it feels like the kind of person who I'm not going to find a reason to break up with,
Okay.
find a reason to screw this up.
Well, hang on. So what I'm hearing you say again is that when you were dating early on, there was an insecurity that you had, which sounds familiar to me, in my experience as well, which is you would date someone and you just think, well, it's like, how would you say it? It's like you didn't feel safe. You didn't feel like the relationship was going to last, or they were going to feel the same about you, or you were going to feel the same about them. Is that right?
Or early on, it was, well, there's clearly, if she likes me, there's clearly something wrong with her.
Interesting.
That
Yeah.
was early
Yeah, I
on.
get
Like
that.
by the time I hit 30, I had kind of outgrown that, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
It took a long time. There were more than one women. There's several, 2 or 3 women looking back, where the moment she started really like, after I worked on it, the moment she started really liking me, I said I was turned off. And I would chase women who were not into me, so I could find a reason to explain why it wasn't working.
Okay.
Later,
So now,
but then that translates. As you get older, the baggage that you carry with you is, I want to be with somebody who makes me feel safe to be with them. And that was something that was lacking from a lot of the relationships that I had. But it took therapy and took some amount of therapy for me to realize that that's what I was looking for.
so how does Jessica, the relationship you're in now, your marriage, was it just you always felt safe from day one? You just like, oh, this is a safe relationship.
Not from day one, but I mean, in an organic, to use the word organic again, in an organic, appropriate, timely, appropriate way. I mean, after a few dates, look, I think that we did video dates for, I think, 3 weeks. I did 6 or 7 of video dates like this, like we were just Zooming or whatever, and got to know each other a little bit. And then, we got into the 5th or 6th time we saw each other in person, we got into it a little bit, and I went off for 2 weeks to go up to Maine to visit my folks over that summer. And when I left, I thought, well, I'm never going to see this woman again.
So you meet her, you have whatever, like a half a dozen video calls, right?
Yeah.
And then you have 5 in-person dates with her.
5 or 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have a disagreement. Do you remember what the disagreement was about?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it, other than there was a question of boundaries.
About what? Boundaries.
About boundaries. Yeah, there was a question of boundaries that kind of set us both off. And I won't talk about it more than that, other than to say, when we parted ways, I wasn't sure if I would ever see her again.
Well, that's what I'm getting to. So you've done a lot of work. I mean, that's a lot of time spent with someone. Like, 6 in-person dates, 6 phone calls, Zoom calls, which are probably long calls. And then you have a fight. You have a disagreement, and not your first thought, but your assumption is that it's over. So on the basis of are you saying on the basis of one disagreement, you were ready to end the relationship?
It wasn't, it's not, I don't want to simplify it. That's oversimplifying. It's not because, oh, we had a fight, it's over. It was more of the way the whole thing transpired. It was off-putting for both of us. And I then drove up to Maine the next day, and I didn't call her because my understanding of how we left things was that she said, give me a little time. But then she called me 2 days later, early in the morning, and said, why the fuck didn't you call me yesterday to talk to me about, So we started to hash that out. And then over the next couple of weeks, we talked, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 more times. But I still was not sure. Certainly we had gotten over that hump, but I wasn't sure what it would be like once we were together, we were in the same place again. So then when I went back, and once we were in the same place, she said afterwards, I realized when I saw you pull up in your car, I realized I was excited. And I said, and it took me a minute, but I realized that, wow, I really like being in this person's presence, and whatever difficulty had been there before was very easy now. And that was the moment when I think both of us knew, okay, we're in it. We're in something special now. And soon after that, I started to feel really safe enough that I told her I loved her before probably I should have. But I was never concerned. But I wasn't concerned about her freaking out or breaking up with me because of it. Like, I knew I was on pretty safe ground.
Well, it sounds like, again, at the beginning of this call, you said that there were things that you wanted. You wanted a partner, you wanted to have children, and you kind of knew, you felt like the window was closing, time wise, and so you were able to get what you wanted before, whatever that. I don't know. I'm not sure the window would have ever actually closed, right? But you achieved what you set out to achieve.
I think that, we all want to be happy. We all want to be happy. And I think that just about all of us deserve to be happy. Some of us don't. But for the most part, we as humans deserve to be, earn the right to be happy. And the fact that I found happiness should be an inspiration to those who are still looking, because it took me a very long time to find it. And I did. And I'm thankful for it every day. And I think that I like to say that when I'm talking to people and say, look, if I can do it, then anybody
can. Okay. Let's end it there. That's perfect.
This is a lot of fun. This is great. I had a great time catching up with you and talking, and I love the questions. It was a really engaging, interesting conversation. I don't talk about this stuff very often.
Congrats on fatherhood. That's a whole nother conversation. It's great. Terrific.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks, Michael. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye, Neil.